Hi everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. In this video, we're going to do the next couple phrases that I looked up in the scripture citation index, and we're going to see how many times these phrases show up over the years. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you end up liking it. Make sure to leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments below, and then also make sure to share this with anyone that might find this interesting. And this is really interesting. I'm about to show you. So I have two phrases here. The first one is rising generation, and then the second one is preparing the world. Now, with all of these phrases, each time I search them in the scripture citation index, I make sure that it's in the context of the second coming. So I've eliminated any that don't pertain to the second coming. Essentially, what you do, in case you want to do this yourself, let me pull it up. Okay, you go to scriptures.byu.edu. Down here at the very bottom right, you have these three icons. You go to search, and then you type in a phrase. So in this case, let's do, and you put it in, you can do different types of searches. It's just like Google. So what I've been doing, I do everything in parentheses because I'm looking for very specific phrases. So in this case, rising generation. So they're both in between parentheses. I don't want anything from the Journal of Discourses, Scriptural Teachings of the Prophet Joseph Smith, and I don't want to sort by relevance because if you do that, then it won't be in chronological order if you're doing what I'm doing with this. So I just have General Conference selected, and it's going to be, they have 1942 until present, okay? So I'm just going to leave it like that, search, and then it pulls up each instance where it shows up in General Conference. It tells you the name of the talk and who it was, the year, and then it has a little, like basically the paragraph, excuse me, or sentences around the phrase, right? So in this case, you have here where it says, paramount role in serving as a shepherd to guide the rising generation to Jesus Christ. Excuse me. Okay, so that's how I did this. I just went through, went down, and then I just tallied them up by year. Okay, so let's take a look at it. Left-hand side, rising generation. Right-hand side, preparing the world. So not a whole lot going on in the 40s for rising generation. Okay, see it a few more times in the 50s. A couple times at the end of the 60s. Okay, see it a little bit more in the 70s with 1978 having it mentioned 3 times. And so far as preparing the world, we haven't seen it come up at all in General Conference until 1982. So that's the first instance of preparing the world. Okay, 86, 90, we have 3. Okay, now we're starting to have kind of like a cluster here around, well, pretty much most of the 90s and then into the early 2000s. So there's kind of a cluster here in the late 90s. And then we have our second instance of preparing the world in 2002. So it's interesting that preparing the world, it's only come up 2 times to this point since 1942. And that kind of surprised me because I would have thought that maybe it would have come up a lot more, or at least a lot more than just 2 times. That's a long time to not be saying preparing the world. Okay, now in 2006, now things are starting to heat up with the rising generation because this is the first time that we have 5 in 1 year I'm talking about this cluster, 5 in 1 year in 2009, and then in 2010 it's brought up 7 times. So this, okay, is becoming a lot more frequent than what we've seen before in the decades prior, where it just kind of comes up every now and then and kind of in like small little clusters, but not much to really speak of. So now it's becoming like a topic, it seems like. Okay, and then in 2011, we see our third instance of preparing the world. Okay, let's move on. Okay, now we're starting to see more colors other than just blue. We have yellow, orange, and green. There were a couple greens down here. Okay, and as you can tell, it goes from blue to green to yellow to orange to red. Okay, so right here, this is a lot more colorful than anything that we've seen before. Okay, now 2017, we have a 5. Okay, now 2018, the year that President Nelson, you see this on the side here? I have roughly the years that coincide with these different presidents of the church. So now we're in the Nelson years, starting in 2018, and then here we are, and we have this cluster here in 2018, 19, and 21 of preparing the world. So let's zoom out so we can look at the big picture. Okay, that's pretty zoomed out. But if you can see this, okay, on the left side, preparing the world, nothing, 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 just boop, boop. And then here, starting in 2011, we have this kind of cluster right here, of preparing the world. But nothing really to mention before that. And then rising generation, that becomes a solid topic by, I would say, probably by 2007, when you have 3 mentions of it. I guess technically in 2006, but this right here, this is not, this is unprecedented. It hasn't happened before this point. The most that you can probably get, let's see, right here we have a cluster of 4. Here's a cluster of 4. Here's a cluster of 4, 3, 3. And then up here, this whole thing is a cluster of, I don't even know what that adds up to. I'm not going to add it, but it's a lot. Between 2010 and 2009, you have 12, a cluster of 12 between just 2 years. Sorry, let's zoom in again. So for some reason, rising generation became like a concrete, solid concept in these last, well, this last decade and a half or so. Interesting, isn't it? What does that say to you? What's your interpretation of this? Of course, a lot of you will probably agree with me that we're getting closer to the second coming, okay? And the rising generation is going to be that generation that greets the Lord at his second coming, right? Look at 2005, or sorry, 2005. Look at 2017 with this spike right here of 5. This is the year before President Nelson becomes a prophet. And it's in 2018 that he does that landmark devotional, worldwide youth devotional called Hope of Israel. And it's about the rising generation, talking about the important role that they're going to play. He establishes the concept of the Lord's Youth Battalion in 2018. Now, we know that when things come out in the church, like changes or I don't know about the Lord's Youth Battalion, but I wouldn't be surprised if that had been in the talks, uh, in the years prior to that point, right? Everyone gives credit to President Nelson for all the changes that have happened in the church. And there was a video that I did where Elder Bednar was talking. I think it was to like CES personnel, and he addressed this topic, how everyone says that basically there hasn't been much revelation with President Monson or President Hinckley. But the fact of the matter is that when these big changes come out, they've been years and sometimes decades uh, in the studying process and research, and you know, as they're deciding of like how or when to implement it. So it's not something that, President Nelson just gets in there and he's like, okay, it's time to change everything. No, those things were in the works for a while, probably well into the Monson years, and possibly even earlier into the Hinckley years. So I can't say for sure with the Lord's Youth Battalion, but it does seem that there's this chatter that suddenly picks up, definitely by 2009. 2009 and 2010, the beginning of President Monson's presidency, there's just this big uptick in talking about the rising generation. And then it kind of continues steady with an uptick the last year of his life in 2017. And then immediately after that is when President Nelson does the Lord's Youth Battalion. And then when it comes to preparing the world, like I said, I'm kind of surprised that it's only shown up this many times. But you have, once again, you have this cluster right here of 3 times that it's mentioned across 3 different years. You have to go back, let's see, 7 years to 2011 to find the next previous time that it comes up. And then you have to go back 9 years to the next one. And then after that, you have to go all the way back to 1982. And then after that, or before that, it's not even brought up. Now, who knows if it's been used before 1942, but that's kind of like not relevant at this point because we're looking. This is like a really good time frame, I think, from the early 40s until present. That really gives us a really good picture of what's going on and what's on the general authorities' minds and what are the topics of discussion among them, because whatever they're talking about in meetings and stuff like that, it's going to come out in general conference, whatever it is that they're thinking about. So it looks like there's always been some discussion about the rising generation. Okay, rising generation, rising generation. But it doesn't really become a big topic until, I mean, if you want to say 2006 or 2009, sometime around then is when it really kicks off. So I feel like this is pretty good evidence that the general authorities really, truly believe that this generation right here are going to be the ones that are going to move on into the millennium. Not that previous generations won't as well. I think a lot of us will, including baby boomers and possibly even President Nelson himself. But the main body of those that I think are going to do the final missionary work in the world is it's probably of this generation right here. Right here. So I don't know. Those are just my thoughts. I'm not an expert at interpreting data, but I think that's, probably a pretty good guess. What kind of thoughts do you have? What do you think about this? Now, remember, you can go to the scripture citation index yourself and search for whatever you want. But I'm going to tell you that there's generally this pattern. This one's like a little bit different because usually, so what I see with all these different search terms is that these second coming topics, they usually cluster around these years, maybe from like 2016 on, okay? And then usually between the year, 2016 all the way down to like the early 80s, it's generally pretty quiet. It's generally pretty quiet. And then in these years right here, especially in the mid 70s, that's when there's like a lot of chatter about the second coming and stuff like that. And I'll show you that in coming videos. But like I said, I feel like I need to kind of do these maybe 2 at a time or so, so as not to miss out on some of these details and stuff like that. Because if we look at the big picture, let me just pull it up here really quick. Let's see, expand that out, and then let's zoom back out to 50%. Okay, this is the big picture, and I want to do a video just about this because there's some things that I can only point out when we're looking at the big picture. But okay, so that's it for this one. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope that this made sense. If you have any questions, let me know. If you have any comments, thoughts, other interpretations, put it in the comments below. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it. Also make sure to share this because, if there's anyone out there that has doubts about whether the second coming is close, this might be, some convincing data to consider that might change somebody's mind. And I'll talk to you guys later.